The secrets of Russia's newest nuclear submarine, Knyaz Pozharsky, have been revealed. Shocking insider information from Russia. The Kremlin's nuclear triad has been completely exposed. State secrets have now spread in all directions. Ukrainian intelligence officers have shown what is really hidden behind the nuclear submarine cruiser that Putin tried so hard to conceal. Everyone thought it was something incredible, but in reality, it's just an empty shell. Knyaz Pozharsky has never known such disgrace. Are the next submarines up next? Don't miss it. The whole truth right now.
A small plaque is welded onto the hull of the submarine. It might not seem very spectacular, but it's a historic ceremony. Knyaz Pozharsky, with factory number 208, will be the last in the line of Borei-class nuclear submarines. These submarines, named after the swift and unstoppable northern wind, are the pinnacle of Russian scientific and technological thought.
They talked about it for almost 10 years. They promised it would be a breakthrough. In the future, Knyaz Pozharsky will form the backbone of Russia's naval strategic nuclear forces for decades to come. The strategic submarine Knyaz Pozharsky was added to the Northern Fleet of the Russian Navy quite recently, on July 24, 2025.
Comrade Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, the Honor Guard has been assembled in your honor.
Against the backdrop of dilapidated buildings stood sailors dressed up for the occasion. The national anthem of the Russian Federation was also played. This is how the Russian dictator Putin accepted the Pozharsky into active duty.
In Severodvinsk, one of Russia's truly leading and most significant shipbuilding centers, we are proudly raising the naval flag on the strategic nuclear submarine cruiser, which is officially named Knyaz Pozharsky. This momentous occasion marks a vital step forward for our naval capabilities.
Russia's new nuclear submarine cruiser Knyaz Pozharsky has frightened the French to the point of nervous trembling. "This is a real monster, there's no escape from it," wrote Russian media. Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence agents were observing the Kremlin's hysteria. After all, one of the key elements of the so-called Kremlin nuclear triad is no secret to them.
Ready to raise the naval flag and proudly display our maritime colors. Permission to proceed?
Permission granted.
Raise the national flag!
Ukrainian intelligence simply published internal documents about the newest Russian submarine, Knyaz Pozharsky. Intelligence obtained a full list of the submarine crew members by name, including information about their positions, qualifications, and physical fitness levels.
During the launching ceremony, the ship's commander breaks a bottle of champagne against the stern. The nuclear submarine Knyaz Pozharsky is the 8th in the Knyaz series, submarines of the 4th generation under the Borei and Borei-A projects. The exact list of weapons on the submarine cruiser is a state secret.
At their disposal are engineering documents, a report on the examination of a deformed radio buoy, listing the members of the commission from the enterprises that participated in the investigation. The combat instructions for the crew, the ship's combat layout, the life support systems diagram, and the organizational structure of the crew are all known.
Such powerful and strategically important vessels form the absolute backbone of the naval strategic nuclear forces, providing a crucial deterrent capability. And taking into account their modernization potential, they will ensure the security of our state for decades to come.
Crew instructions for cabins and living quarters, guidelines for transferring the wounded and cargo, procedures for towing, and other official instructions. All these documents have already been studied by the main intelligence directorate.
All the shortcomings that were present on the first ships have been taken into account. Now, all the equipment and weaponry have been thoroughly refined. That's why its uniqueness lies in the fact that it's the 8th one. The 8th, can you imagine? The 8th one.
The data that was made public, considered secret in the Russian Federation, revealed all the features of the submarine Knyaz Pozharsky.
Thanks to the use of advanced engineering solutions, the ship is equipped with modern power plants and navigation instruments. The conditions for the crew's service and rest have been significantly improved.
It turned out that despite the defects and traces of corrosion shown in the photographs published along with the documents, the submarine was put on duty.
The ships, proudly built at Sevmash, continue the long and proud tradition of serving the motherland under the honorable names of distinguished people who have brought great glory to this country, this land, this nation.
But not only does the submarine itself have defects, according to the documentation, the physical fitness of part of the crew is also low, which may indicate problems with combat readiness.
What was invested in this ship?
Knowledge, experience, skills, working hands, and of course soul and heart.
The Knyaz Pozharsky was laid down at Sevmash in Severodvinsk in 2016. It was launched in February 2024. Despite all the violations, the 170-meter-long submarine arrived at its permanent base, the main base of the Northern Fleet submarine forces in Gadzhievo, Murmansk region, on August 2nd. The intelligence obtained by Ukrainian reconnaissance makes it possible to identify not only the features and technical limitations of this particular submarine, but also of other Project 955A submarines, which are critically important for maintaining the imperial myth of the aggressor state, Russia.
Emergency! There is a shocking HIV epidemic in the Russian army. The scale is off the charts. This has never happened before. There is an HIV outbreak in the ranks of the Russian army that can no longer be concealed. Hundreds, if not thousands, are infected. The command is in a panic. Mobilized soldiers are being sent to the front even though their diagnosis is known. What is this? Negligence or a deliberate destruction of their own resources? A scandal that could undermine the entire army from within. We're telling you about it right now.
It's not just the Ukrainian armed forces helping to destroy the occupiers in this war, but also HIV. The disease is mowing down Russian soldiers. But you won't hear about this on federal channels.
I deliberately failed the medical commission because I have HIV. I got hepatitis there, and my left kidney isn't working, it's failing. What should I do? Help all of us. Everyone here is without legs. The only thing uniting us is that tomorrow we'll be sent to the front line.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the number of HIV infections among Russian soldiers has increased by 2,000%.
I passed the medical commission at my city's military enlistment office, so it turns out they just forged everything. After that, in Nizhny Novgorod at the regional military enlistment office, I didn't go through a medical examination there. I just brought the documents.
What caused the sharp increase? First, it's due to unprotected sexual contact among Russian soldiers and drug use. Second, syringes tend to run out very quickly, especially during war. That's why medical staff in field hospitals don't hesitate to reuse disposable syringes multiple times.
During the service itself, some people got infected because we know from independent sources that there are a lot of wounded, a lot of injuries, including, loss of limbs. And naturally, this is associated with significant blood loss. And so if a person, for example, is living with HIV, not receiving therapy, and maybe even unaware of their status, and then suffers such an injury, it's possible that this infected blood could have been transmitted to others as well.
The rise in diseases and deaths from the immunodeficiency virus is also directly linked to the Kremlin, which, under the guise of protecting traditional values, has increased pressure on educational and preventive organizations fighting HIV. The authorities have almost stopped publishing data on HIV. At the same time, the Russian army, which is in a state of prolonged isolation and lacks medical assistance, has become especially vulnerable.
For example, they started recruiting prisoners with HIV into the army. Well, actually, probably not into the army itself, but into private military companies. Plus, after the partial mobilization was announced, and also after they started offering such huge sums for signing a contract, some people with HIV joined the service. They decided to hide their HIV status.
Despite statements that people with HIV are not being sent to fight in the war with Ukraine, in reality there are at least hundreds of contract soldiers, mobilized troops and volunteers with this diagnosis on the front lines.
Despite the diagnosis and the medical commission's conclusion of limited fitness, the soldier was transferred to a motorized rifle battalion and later to combat positions.
Conscripts diagnosed with HIV are not accepted into the army. This disease falls under category D, which means complete exemption from service.
Yes, indeed, there may have been cases when a person at a certain stage of HIV infection was allowed to continue serving in the army if the diagnosis was made during their service. But at the same time, a person with HIV was not allowed into the army in the first place. And here there was also strict control at the entry stage when it was mandatory to provide certificates regarding HIV, the presence of HIV infection, viral hepatitis, and tuberculosis. All of these diseases served as grounds for exemption. And again, after the so-called special military operation began, and after it became absolutely necessary to fill the ranks of the army with new people, so to speak, to replace those who had departed or were no longer present, of course, they started to turn a blind eye to this particular situation.
From the very beginning of the mobilization in Russia, HIV-positive Russians have been receiving draft notices and continue to receive them to this day. The military enlistment officers are not aware of their current health status. Some volunteers hide it in order to go to war and earn money, while others simply do not know about their diagnoses. At the same time, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation is concerned about reputational losses.
Therefore, yes, it is indeed impossible to say that the HIV epidemic has been eradicated as of today. And unfortunately, here, I'm afraid, officials from the Ministry of Health just want to be overly optimistic.
In 2025, it became known that entire assault battalions were being formed from people with hepatitis and HIV.
Last time, he was there for 7 or 8 months and was constantly on the front line. But back then, he didn't have this diagnosis, he had strength, he could run, and so on. We can't rule out that now they'll gather everyone with diagnoses and throw them onto the front line.
The situation is so bad that these units, even though they undergo training, are deliberately being sent to be disposed of on the battlefield by the Ministry of Defense, despite their training and the shortage of personnel due to losses.
I went through the military training center. I was diagnosed with HIV. I was told to wait for the Central Military Medical Commission for my discharge. Today, the commander said that he is sending me back to the Special Military Operations Zone.
A soldier like that at war is a risk. The infection could spread among other servicemen. But in addition to this, the Russian occupier creates difficulties in providing medical assistance to the wounded and poses a direct threat to medical personnel who are already scarce on the front line. By the end of 2024, the number of infection cases in the Russian Federation's army had increased 20-fold. Since 2022, Putin has been heavily preoccupied with the war, and the Russian Federation has entered the top 5 countries in the world for new HIV infections, surpassed only by South Africa, Mozambique, Nigeria, and India.
For this government, people are just a resource. For example, they are a resource to wage war. So on the one hand, they need healthy, strong people in a fascist, you could say, sense. But on the other hand, we also have no idea how many people with HIV have been sent to the combat zone. There are absolutely no statistics on this matter.
How often they inject themselves there every day and how many heroes will come home to have children, we also don't know.
Due to sanctions and lack of funding, a record number of interruptions in antiretroviral therapy medications were reported in 2024. But not only is the Kremlin killing Russians by starving them of medication, they're also putting Ukrainians in the occupied territories at risk. There is no reliable data on what is happening with therapy in the occupied territories. Back in 2022, the UN reported that antiretroviral therapy centers had been closed in these territories. Because of the Kremlin's attitude towards serious diseases, the demographic and economic consequences of the outbreak will be felt for decades and may even prove more devastating than the consequences of the invasion of Ukraine.
Breaking news! Ukraine has rewritten the rules of war. A brilliant operation by the Ukrainian armed forces has succeeded. A plan that seemed insane turned out to be a trap for the occupiers. Pozharsky made a statement. History has never seen such moves. A sharp and unexpected strike on the front. The enemy is confused. And in Donetsk, there is utter shock. The Russians have gone to extremes. The consequences could reverberate throughout the entire country. All the most important updates from the front lines right now. You haven't heard anything like this.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Before.
Long-suffering Kherson is once again under a massive attack by Russian occupiers. The day before, the enemy dropped 2 guided aerial bombs on the city, aiming to destroy the local bridge. As a result of the attacks, the automobile crossing leading to the Korabel neighborhood was seriously damaged. As seen in the footage, the bridge sustained significant damage. There is a gaping hole in the middle of the roadway. Nevertheless, the crossing has withstood the attack.
Regarding the bridge, yes, the bridge was hit. Russian propaganda has already managed to spread a fake about the bridge being destroyed, but it is still standing. Indeed, the bridge sustained some damage, the roadway has been damaged.
By dropping a bomb on the only overpass leading to the Korabel neighborhood and cutting off the gas pipeline, the occupiers have trapped the residents of Kherson. Local authorities are urging residents to evacuate, as due to the serious damage to the bridge, it will be difficult for now to deliver food and other essential goods to the neighborhood.
There are certain logistical problems precisely because of the damage to this roadway. This affects the delivery of food, medicines, and also poses a problem for emergency medical services and all other services as a whole. It is precisely because of this situation with logistical problems that we are emphasizing the need to consider evacuation from the Korabel neighborhood.
Meanwhile, local volunteers have already checked the damaged bridge for stability. After driving around the crater, they managed to reach the other side. However, it is unknown how long the crossing will last in this condition. The Kherson Regional State Administration also does not rule out repeated attempts by the occupiers to destroy the crossing, especially since the Russians have recently been resorting to new tactics of terror. According to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, the most difficult situation on the front today is in the Pokrovske, Dobropilya and Novopavlivka directions. The Russian army is employing a tactic of total infiltration there and increasing sabotage activities behind our lines.
The enemy is intensifying efforts to capture our key agglomerations, searching for weak spots in our defense and conducting active combat operations simultaneously in several directions. In this way, they are trying to enter in particular Pokrovsk. However, Russian sabotage and small infantry groups are being neutralized. To effectively counter sabotage and reconnaissance groups, we have created and are deploying anti-sabotage reserves, whose task is to search for and destroy enemy sabotage groups.
By the way, our defenders from the anti-sabotage reserve announced by Syrsky can already boast their first results. Thus, in temporarily occupied Melitopol, GOR agents blew up a car carrying Kadyrovites. This unique operation was caught on video. It is known that the partisans managed to plant explosives in the occupiers' minivan, after which it exploded. At the moment of the explosion, fighters from the Akhmat unit were inside the vehicle. As a result of the detonation, at least 5 Kadyrovites were killed. The explosion also wounded 2 occupiers who were in a neighboring vehicle and destroyed a mobile electronic warfare complex. Thanks to the brilliant work of our defenders, the occupiers also experienced the shortest triumph of the entire war in Ukraine. It took the fighters of the main intelligence directorate exactly 24 hours to drive the Russians out of the positions where they had hastily arranged a photo shoot with the tricolor. We are talking about the settlement of Zelenaya Rosha in the Donetsk region. There, after capturing the settlement, Russian fighters tried to reach the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region and, in their excitement, hurried to report their success. However, 24 hours later, it was already the fighters of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine taking photos in the same spot. Nevertheless, analysts at Deep State are forced to acknowledge that, despite everything, the pace of the occupiers' advance on the front has not slowed down. Thus, in July, they were at about the same level as in June. The Russian army managed to capture 564 square kilometers of our land. The analysts also broke down the data for all directions of the front, clearly showing what percentage of lost territory and what percentage of assault actions fall on each of them. According to the statistics, the Pokrovsk and Sumy directions are the least effective for the Russian army. After all, it is there that the enemy has to attack more frequently to achieve any success. Meanwhile, the Novopavlivka direction is the most problematic for the Ukrainian armed forces. There, the enemy achieves greater success with fewer losses. For the other sections of the front, the breakdown is almost 1-to-1. And there is yet another unpleasant piece of news from the front. The occupiers are doing everything they can to restore Donetsk airport in order to use it in the war against Ukraine. This is evidenced by recent satellite images. The fortifications that previously blocked the runway of what was once an international airport have already been covered over, indicating a likely preparation for its reuse. Construction work can be seen on the site of the former parking lots. Analysts suggest that a fuel and technical base is being prepared there. In addition, there is preliminary information about individual launches of Russian attack drones from the territory of Donetsk airport. And finally, some extremely discouraging news for the occupiers and for Putin personally. Ukraine has likely blown up the Kremlin's main gas pipeline in the Volgograd region. This concerns a section of the Central Asia Center pipeline, the third longest in the world. Although it has not been directly stated that it was Ukrainian special services who carried out the explosion, all indications point to this. According to analysts, the operation was likely carried out thanks to GOR agents in Russia.